Awesome. Good. Thanks, Rose. So, yeah, Rose, thanks for taking a few minutes to talk with us today. Really what I'd like to do is kind of share with you a little bit about what we've learned with your organization, and where you guys are trying to go from a cloud adoption perspective, and where Dell is helping our customers in this journey. I always like to start with talking about a few challenges that we're seeing in the industry. Customers are faced with, and have been for a while, with this idea of cloud and public cloud, right? And when we say, public cloud, we're referring to the hyperscalers. So customers are like, hey, how do we utilize Azure? How do we utilize AWS or even GCP? Like, what's the best cloud for the best workloads, right? So that's a challenge. And a lot of customers are spending a lot of money in consulting to figure out, where their workloads would be better fitted, right, in the cloud. Security is a huge challenge, right? A lot of local higher ed government entities are wondering, like, okay, if I put all my data in the cloud, or these data workloads in the cloud, is it going to be safe, right? What happens if bad actors get into their cloud? What happens if they have outages? So customers are trying to figure out how to reestablish some of the security posture in moving their workloads into the public cloud. They're also trying to figure out, hey, you know what? In infrastructure, in IT, we've always been CapEx heavy, right? We've always had a lot of dollars to go spend in our budget cycles on new infrastructure. Well, as we all know, when we move into the public cloud environments, there's no more CapEx dollars. It's all OpEx now. So especially in the SLED organizations and SLED market, right? There's a lot of CapEx dollars, and it's not necessarily OpEx budget driven. So customers are trying to figure that out as well. And then lastly, I would say customers are trying to figure out their people and their processes, right? I'll talk a little bit about this in a second, but in today's climate, our biggest, what we're hearing most customers have the biggest challenge is around their people, right? Like, how do I hire, retain, attract, and keep top talent, right? First of all, they can't find it. They're having a tough time keeping it because the other companies are short-staffed and trying to find good people. So how do we focus on the people piece of that? And then we have all these processes and documentation in place for how we deploy infrastructure, how we provide services to the business, and the business doesn't want to wait, right? And so our customers are challenged with, how do we shift the people process component of this? So let me talk a little bit about like where we've gone and where we're headed. So, traditional IT, think about 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago, before the birth of public cloud and the hyperscalers, IT had a monopoly, right? They owned the applications, they owned the infrastructure. If the organization needed to do something different, they would have to go to IT. IT could take however long they want to take because there was no competition. There was no cloud option, right? So as organizations started to mature, right, and software started changing the IT landscape, organizations were trying to figure out, okay, now how can I leverage software, right, to drive innovation, to be agile, and to respond quicker to the business. So there's this term that is out there called the software-defined data center. So we had our silo people who were storage, server, networking, and backup, right, had to come together and deploy software that went across the silos to help IT become more agile, right? So in the same tune, right, then we have the birth of the hyperscalers, right? And these software-defined data center silo, or the silos of employees, right, they started to become more cloud architects, and silo walls started to be pulled down. We started having more VMware heavy engineers, right? And they coined this term for their people, cloud architects, which were more around deploying infrastructure in an automated fashion. And then in that same time, right, we had all the developers say, holy cow, like, I don't need to wait on IT, right? I can go to, swipe my credit card and spin up infrastructure in AWS or Azure, like in minutes, right? And I'm developing out there on their proprietary platforms, on all their APIs, like putting all of our organizational's development data out in the cloud, right? And then when they want to start bringing it in for production, they're realizing, oh, we can't. So let's just spin it up into production up there, right? And we've heard of stories like Netflix and other software companies that have gotten kind of pigeonholed and stuck in the public cloud because of this exact, model, right? And then another player that kind of comes into the fold is security, right? Security also has always been like, hey, keep everything in-prem, protect the front door. How do we utilize software to protect, bad guys from coming in, and where are our vulnerabilities and all the paperwork that comes along with the security office, right? So now the customer has gotten their cloud architects trying to get their on-prem infrastructure operational, agile, working well, because they're now competing with all these hyperscalers, right? So, next step after this kind of situation, you have IT now trying to manage all the infrastructure that their organization has spun up in these public clouds, right? Like, hey, we've got all this information out in Azure and our bill is expensive. Hey, IT, go fix this, right? And IT saying, well, it's not that easy. We got to re-platform the application, or we have to, rebuild it if we want to bring it on-prem. There's no mobility, right? So with our friends at VMware, we built this VMware cloud model where we can help customers move workloads, any cloud, on-prem, off-prem, hyperscaler, right? And have that mobility that the customer is looking for. So what does Dell do, right? So here's our approach. Customers, as I mentioned, are looking how to best utilize a multi-cloud environment. They see the value in the hyperscalers and putting workloads in certain places, right? Dell takes an open ecosystem approach, and we have options for our customers around buy versus subscribe. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So we got three pillars, right? For our approach. We've got a multi-cloud data protection pillar, a multi-cloud storage pillar, and accelerating DevOps pillar. And when we talk to our customers on a daily basis, we're saying, hey, how do you want to utilize multi-cloud around data protection, storage, and DevOps? And we've got really fantastic stories around each of these. So I'll start with data protection. We've been in the cloud from a data protection perspective for years, right? We have software that's running in our hyperscalers for backup. We're currently protecting about 10 exabytes of data, backup data, in the public cloud today. We've been doing this for a while. We've noticed through customer feedback and through total cost of ownership models we've done is customers are recognizing about an 80% lower total cost of ownership running backup workloads into the cloud. So with our recent announcements at Dell Technologies World, right, we now have the ability to continue to help customers run their data protection environment in the hyperscalers. But we also have the ability to help build air gap cyber vaults in the event that the bad guys get in and encrypt data and ask for a ransom, right? So customers in the multi-cloud environment are building out their fully automated private cloud with air gap vault, right, for their on-prem environment. But we have the ability to deploy that same architecture in the public clouds for our customers. Around multi-cloud storage, right? You heard at Dell Tech World a lot of conversation, a lot of announcements around Project Alpine, right? So our Dell Cloud multi-cloud storage approach is being able to run block, file, or object up in the hyperscalers, right? And what does this do? This gives our customer operational consistency. When we think back to some of the challenges around people and having, getting people and keeping people, right? Like when you have Dell infrastructure in your on-prem solution today in your data center, right? You don't need to go train this person on yet another platform if you want to go to utilize the hyperscalers, right? You have the ability to deploy storage software in the hyperscaler and manage it the same way you would if it was on-prem. right? So that gives you that operational consistency approach. Lastly, I'll talk about DevOps, right? So customers have the ability to build or buy their DevOps environment, right? And if they build, we've got flexible infrastructure that they could buy and build and run a DevOps stack on, right? But also we have the ability for customers to buy, right? And we have DevOps ready platforms to help customers develop, spend less time on administrative tasks and more time on developing tasks. And we have just to name a few platforms, our Microsoft Azure stack, our AWS HKS on VMware, Tanzu on VxRail, and Google Anthos. So we have the ability to help our customers deploy an on-prem, colo, or cloud DevOps environment as well. So, Mr. Customer, I hope I was able to kind of shape out our approach to helping customers in the multi-cloud universe, so to speak. Dell again has very open ecosystem, right? So you're not locked into one vendor or stuck in a particular cloud. So what I'd like to do is have a follow-up meeting and maybe even set up a executive briefing, and you can bring your folks in so we can have a more relevant, detailed conversation around this. How does that sound?
Sounds great, Mr. Corral. Thank you so much.
Awesome. All right. So if you want any feedback, team, any thoughts,